Some wounds don't live on the skin. They live inside the very house we once called love. Texas early morning. The sun rises gently over the cotton fields, a pale gold light slipping through the blinds and painting the wooden floor in soft honey tones. Outside, the wind hums low, carrying the distant coo of mourning doves. The old house breathes with the rhythm of dawn, quiet, deliberate, alive. In the kitchen, the kettle hums. Margaret moves slowly, the way people do when they've grown used to silence. Her hands are steady, though a faint tremor trails her fingertips as she lifts a porcelain teacup. The engraving on its side, J+M, catches the morning light. She runs her thumb over it as though tracing a memory carved in bone. John and Margaret. Once 2 letters, now 2 lives folded into one. She pours the tea, steam rising like ghostly ribbons, and carries the cup to the table by the window. The same seat, the same view every morning. She watches the light slide across the faded photograph, resting near the vase of dried lavender. John's smile is still there, calm, confident, patient. The way he looked at her when he promised things would last. Outside, the porch creaks as the breeze stirs. The chime, John hung 20 years ago, jingles faintly, its gentle song blending with the sound of her breath. She closes her eyes and listens. For a moment, time folds. The house smells of fresh sawdust again, and John's laughter drifts through the air. She can almost see him, hammer in hand, sweat on his brow, building not just walls, but a world. "This home will keep you safe," he said, once leaning against the half-finished frame, "even when I'm gone." Back then, she laughed and told him he was too serious. But John wasn't the kind of man to joke about promises. He built each wall with intention, every plank set like a vow. And now, as sunlight seeps through the curtains and touches her face, Margaret feels the truth of his words. This house has been more than shelter. It's been love in timber and nail, a cathedral of memory, where their story still lingers in the grain. She sips her tea, the warmth spreading across her chest. Yet beneath that warmth is a cold she can't shake. Because love, like wood, can splinter, and sometimes what you build to last ends up breaking you. Her gaze drifts toward the door. For years, that doorway has been both blessing and curse. The place where her husband left for work each morning, and where her son began to leave her piece by piece. Ethan, her boy. The name still feels soft in her mouth, though the years have sharpened its edges. There was a time he filled this house with laughter, small feet pounding across the floorboards, pockets bulging with rocks and marbles he declared treasures. He used to climb onto John's lap, eyes bright with wonder, asking how wood could become walls, how nails could hold love together. He was gentle, curious, too smart for his age. Always kissed her cheek goodnight. Always asked for stories before bed. The day John died, something in Ethan shifted, a fault line deep beneath his skin. He was 17, all height, in silence. At the funeral, he stood beside her, hands shoved in his pockets, staring down at the coffin as if trying to solve a riddle he didn't believe in. In the months that followed, he stopped asking questions, stopped smiling. His eyes dulled like light dimming behind a storm. Then came the late nights, the smell of smoke on his clothes. The lies, small at first, then heavy, wet with guilt. The first time she found the gambling slips, she told herself it was a mistake. The second time, she told herself it was grief. The third time, she stopped pretending and started paying. She sold her wedding ring to cover his debt, the same ring John had slipped onto her finger under an oak tree, promising forever. Then she sold the car, then a patch of land John had planned to turn into a garden. Each time she thought this will be the last. Each time Ethan promised it would be. Each time he broke that promise like a bottle against the floor. And still she couldn't stop. Because love, once pure, had turned into rescue. And rescue had turned into sacrifice. "I bought his freedom," she whispers to the room, "with my own life." The words hang there fragile and final. Outside, the wind picks up. The chime rattles against the porch beam. Somewhere thunder groans on the horizon. It's late afternoon when she hears the screech of tires on gravel. The sound startles her sharp, urgent. Through the window, she glimpses a figure climbing from a dented pickup, shoulders, hunched eyes hidden beneath a tangle of hair. Ethan. Her heart stumbles in her chest. It's been months since she last saw him, months since the last phone call that ended in shouting. The screen door slams. Heavy footsteps cross the porch. Then the handle turns, and he's standing there, thinner than she remembers, jaw tight, eyes, bloodshot knuckles, bruised. "Mom," he rasps, voice rough from cigarettes. "Sell the house." She freezes. "What?" "Sell it. Please. I'm in trouble again. If you sell, I can pay everything back. We can start over." Her throat tightens. "Ethan, this house, your father built it. It's all we have left." He shakes his head, a bitter laugh slipping out. "No, Mom. It's all you have left. It's just wood and memories. Memories don't pay interest." The words hit her like a slap. For a moment, all she can hear is the blood rushing in her ears. "Don't talk about your father that way," she says quietly. Ethan's eyes flash. He slams his fist against the wall, once, twice, until the skin splits. Blood spatters the wood. "Being good never paid the bills," he shouts. The house trembles around them. The first storm of the season came without warning. One moment, the sky was heavy with silence. The next, it tore open rain, falling in relentless sheets. The house moaned under the weight of wind and water. Every crack in the walls seemed to breathe, every shadow stretched longer. Margaret gathered the papers from the table. The deed, the insurance, the worn photograph of John. She slipped the papers into a drawer, placed the photograph on top, and pressed her palm against it for a moment, as if steadying herself on his face. The air smelled of damp wood and rust. Somewhere in the distance, thunder growled. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, poured herself a cup of tea, and stood by the window, watching the rain swallow the world. The glass fogged beneath her breath. For a fleeting second, she wished the storm would pass her house by, but storms never ask for permission. Then came the sound, fists pounding against the door. "Mom," her heart jolted. She knew that voice hoarse, cracked, frayed at the edges. "Mom, open the door." Another thud, then another. "You want to see me die out here?" She froze, the teacup trembling in her hand. Through the thin curtain, she could see his silhouette, shoulders hunched, swaying head bowed under the rain. She opened the door just enough to meet his eyes. He was soaked through hair, plastered to his forehead, the smell of whiskey thick around him. "Ethan," she said softly, "you shouldn't be out here." He leaned on the frame water dripping from his sleeves. "I've got nowhere else to go." "Come inside," she said, stepping back. "We'll talk when you're sober." But he didn't move. He stared past her into the house, like it was something he'd lost and could never get back. "I'm done talking," he muttered. "You either help me or you'll bury me." Her voice stayed calm, though her heart raced. "You don't need money, Ethan. You need help." "I need both," he shouted. "You think prayers fix debt. You think kindness feeds me." The rain beat harder against the porch. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, pale, desperate, young, and old all at once. "Please," she whispered. "Come in, warm yourself." But he only shook his head, eyes filling with something dark. Then he turned, stumbled down the steps, and vanished into the night. The door swung shut behind him with a groan. Margaret stood there for a long time, listening to the rain batter the roof to the empty space where her son had been. He came again 2 days later. It was still raining, though gentler, now a slow weeping sky. Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table, folding laundry, when the knock came. Not frantic this time, just steady, controlled. She opened the door. Ethan stood there, sober hair combed, eyes clearer, but colder. "Mom," he said, voice low, "I've thought about it. I have a plan." She waited. "Sell the house," he said. "We'll pay the debt clear, everything, and start new. I'll take care of you. You won't have to worry about anything again." Margaret's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. She could almost hear John's voice echoing in her ear. "This home will keep you safe." "You want to take care of me?" she asked softly. "Yes." She studied him. "You can't buy back what was built with love." He frowned. "Mom, this house isn't a vault, Ethan. It's a promise. Your father's hands are in every nail. Selling it would be selling him." His eyes hardened. Memories don't pay interest, Mom. The shout cracked through the room like thunder. Her hand jerked. The teacup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Porcelain shards scattered, one slicing her palm. Blood mingled with the rainwater, seeping in beneath the door. Ethan froze, then looked away. Margaret pressed a napkin to her hand. Some things, she said quietly, aren't meant to be sold. He turned his back to her, fists clenched at his sides. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. When the door closed, the wind carried in a faint chill. She didn't move for a long while. The blood on the floor dried darker than the rain. That night she slept in John's old chair, her body aching with the weight of years. She dreamed of Ethan as a boy, running barefoot through the hallways, laughter bouncing off the walls. When she woke, the chair was cold, the house silent. The next morning, she reached for the small chain around her neck, the one holding the brass key to the safe under her bed. Inside, it were deeds documents, and the last letter John ever wrote. She touched it gently, her fingers tracing the outline like a rosary. That afternoon, as the clouds thickened again, Ethan returned. This time, there was no knocking. The door burst open, slamming against the wall. Mom, she turned from the stove, startled. Ethan. He strode in rain, clinging to his coat, eyes blazing. Give me the key. What key? He pointed to the chain. The one around your neck. She stepped back instinctively, one hand clutching the pendant. Ethan, please. I need it. He lunged, grabbing the chain. The metal bit into her skin. Stop, she gasped. You're hurting me. Then give it to me. His voice cracked, filled with panic. The rain pounded on the roof, lightning flashing through the window. She struggled, her frail hands gripping his wrists. This isn't you, she whispered. This isn't my boy. But desperation had carved something wild in his face. He yanked harder. The chain snapped. She stumbled backward, her breath shallow, her chest heaving. For a moment, the only sound was the storm outside, in their ragged breathing. Ethan froze, the key dangling from his fist. Margaret looked at him, not with anger, but with grief, so deep it silenced her. Slowly, his fingers uncurled. The key clattered to the floor. He stared at it, then at her, as if waking from a dream. I'm sorry, he whispered. But the apology was small, lost in the thunder. Then he turned and ran the door, banging behind him. She stood there alone, clutching her bruised throat, the broken chain still warm against her palm. Outside, the rain fell harder. Inside, something fragile within her began to crack. The storm returned with a vengeance 3 nights later. Margaret sat at the table, her shawl draped around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the candle flickering before her. The house was dark, power long gone, every corner alive with the voice of the wind. Then the sound of footsteps. Heavy, determined. The door swung open. Ethan filled the frame, drenched, trembling. Mom, he said, breathless. I'm done begging. When I opened my eyes, the world was white. White walls, white sheets, white lights spilling through thin blinds. The faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air, sharp and sterile, drowning out the scent of rain that had clung to me for days. A nurse adjusted the bandage around my forehead and smiled politely. You're lucky, she said softly. Your neighbors found you just in time. I tried to smile back, but my lips felt heavy. My arm rested in a sling, fingers stiff. My head throbbed, each pulse echoing the memory of that night. The shouting, the shove, the sound of bone meeting wood. When the nurse left, I turned toward the small mirror mounted on the wall. What stared back was not the woman I remembered. Her hair had turned silver, streaked with exhaustion. A white bandage wrapped across her brow. Her eyes were swollen, ringed with purple shadows. Her lips were pale. Her skin, thin, translucent, seemed to hold the weight of years unspoken. For a long time, I just looked at the wrinkles carved by worry, the bruises born from love, the eyes that still searched for a son who no longer looked back. Then softly, I spoke to the reflection, I loved you the wrong way. The words were heavy, yet they lifted something from my chest. I had spent years mistaking protection for love, sacrifice for duty. I had built my son a home made of forgiveness so soft, He never learned how to stand. And in doing so, I had forgotten how to stand myself. 3 days later, the doctor signed my release papers. The neighbors helped me back into the house, slow steps, careful breaths. The air inside was damp and quiet. The clock ticked in the living room, unbothered by all it had witnessed. I walked to the table, placed the photograph of John upright again, and whispered, "You were right. We can lose everything if we hold on too tightly." That night, as I sat by the window, the phone buzzed. A message from Ethan lit up the screen. "Sell the house or take care of yourself. I'm done asking. No greeting. No apology. No warmth. Just demand." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I pressed delete. The click was soft, almost merciful. Outside, rain began again, light steady. A droplet slid down the glass, tracing a slow path downward, catching the lamplight as it fell. It looked like a tear the house itself had shed. I set the phone down and folded my hands. Silence filled the room like a prayer. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. Just still as though every storm had finally passed, leaving only truth in its wake. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was David, a man John had trusted long ago. He met me in his office papers, stacked neatly around him, his eyes kind but curious. "Margaret," he said, "after I finished my story, you've carried this long enough. There's a way to protect what's left." How, I asked? "There's a foundation, Safe Haven. They manage property trusts for women like you. If you sign over ownership, the house will be safe. No one, not even your son, can sell it without your consent." I sat quietly, letting his words settle. "But," I said finally, "he'll hate me." David shook his head. "He already does. This isn't about hate or love. It's about safety." He slid the papers across the desk. My name waited at the bottom, printed in careful letters. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, but not from fear, from release. I thought of John hammering each board into place, whispering, "This house will keep you safe." Then I pressed the pen down and signed. The line wavered, but it was steady enough to hold a lifetime. When I left the office, the rain had stopped. The sky was a pale blue, washed clean. I walked home beneath it, feeling lighter than I had in years. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh sheet of paper. The ink flowed easily, unhurried. I wrote the words slowly, letting each one find its place. A house is where love lives, not greed. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully and sealed it with wax, pressing John's old stamp into it. The mark looked firm, certain. I placed the envelope on the table beside the photograph. Through the window, the clouds parted. A shaft of sunlight spilled across the floorboards, warm and gold. For the first time, I didn't see ghosts in this house, only blessings. By dawn, I had packed my bags. Just one suitcase, a few clothes, my Bible, and the photograph. The pastor came a week after the court papers were signed, and the phone call from the sheriff had ended. He found me in the small room I was renting above the florist's shop, the one with thin curtains that made the afternoon light look like milk. He set his Bible on his lap and looked at me for a long moment, the way men of God do when they are weighing the cost of their next question. "Margaret," he said at last, "are you not afraid people will call you unkind, that they'll say you turned your back on your own flesh and blood?" I turned my bandaged hand toward the window, where the light pooled warm across the gauze. Beneath the wrap, the ache had quieted to something steady and honest, like a bell rung once and then remembered. Outside, I could hear the florist laughing with a customer. Somehow, that ordinary sound steadied me. "Pastor," I said, "I'm not afraid of being called unkind. I'm afraid of losing myself again." He let the words rest between us. The clock on the mantel gave a small click. Dust drifted in the light like slow confetti. "Forgiveness doesn't always mean return," he murmured, almost to himself. I nodded. "And love doesn't always mean rescue." He bowed his head and prayed with me, not for Ethan to be delivered into my arms, but for both of us to be delivered into truth. When he rose to leave, he squeezed my shoulder and did not try to change my mind. After he was gone, I sat by the window with the cup of tea I had forgotten to drink. The steam had thinned, but the porcelain still warmed my palms. The sunlight traced a bright bar across the white wrap on my hand, and I watched it slowly move a patient golden river sliding toward evening. Silence collected around me, careful and full. It did not accuse. It did not demand. It only breathed. For the first time, the quiet felt like shelter instead of punishment. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, the same day. The florist downstairs set buckets of peonies on the sidewalk, and the street smelled sweet as rain. The envelope was thin, the handwriting uneven, as if his hand shook, or he had learned to write again under harsh lights. I set the kettle back on the cooling burner and opened it carefully so the paper would not tear. "Mom, I miss home." That was the first line. The rest came in short bursts, words arriving the way breath arrives after you've run too far. I don't sleep here. I think about the floorboards and the creak on the third stair. I think about the way sunlight hits the portrait of Dad in the afternoon. I think about your tea, the one that smells like oranges. I don't know what I was thinking. I miss home. The letters blurred. Not because I cried, I didn't. The tears had been spent long ago, the way a river spends itself into the sea. I stood with the letter and listened to the florist clatter tins below, to the town bus sigh at the corner, to the kettle finally go still. Then I folded the paper along its worn creases and slid it back into the envelope. I placed it in the top drawer of the little desk by the window and closed the drawer without locking it. "I am not punishing you," I told the quiet room, and my voice did not shake. "I am just not saving you anymore." The wind curled the curtain against my wrist and retreated. Across the way, someone turned on a radio, soft jazz, a saxophone finding its way. I rested my bandaged hand in the sunlight and let the warmth stitch its slow embroidery across my skin. Days found their shape. In the mornings, I walked to the bakery for dark bread and apricot jam. I learned the names of the doves that perched on the telephone wire. Or rather, I gave them names because naming makes company of loneliness. In the afternoons, I read in the chair by the window until the light softened toward gold. At night, I wrote small prayers on loose paper for Ethan's safety, for my steadiness, for the house that had held us both. None of the prayers asked for the past to return. All of them asked for truth. And then on a Thursday that smelled of rain, again, I saw a notice pinned to the corkboard in the church foyer. Mothers who still stand. Thursdays, 7 p.m., Fellowship Hall. I slipped the paper into my pocket and went home to make tea and think. I did not want to be a woman who told the hard parts out loud. But I had become a... The letter came in late autumn, folded with the same precision he used to pack his lies. The handwriting was firmer now, steadier, the ink darker. For a moment, I thought perhaps it would begin with, "I'm sorry," or "I understand now," but it didn't. "Mom," it read, "I need a little money to start over. I'm trying to find work, but I can't do it alone. Just enough to get by. I'll pay you back, I promise. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a request, another hand reaching out of the same hole he had dug for years." I sat with the letter, letting the paper rest against my palms, the edges soft and worn, like the voice of someone I used to know. Outside, the sun was low, spilling gold across the sill. Dust danced in it, small and stubborn, refusing to settle. For a long while, I said nothing. Then I smiled, small real. A smile that came from the quiet certainty that had taken me decades to build. "You broke my arm."